noob. You are nothing, he sneered, until she left and admitted she was his only reason to breathe. The kingdom of Veoloria had always been cloaked in mist and shadow, as though the sun itself feared to linger over its hills and towers. The people whispered of the king who ruled it, a man of cold eyes and sharper words, King Eric, whose name alone could silence a room.
They said he carried a curse, an ancient darkness that bound his heart, though none could say how deep it ran.
On the morning of the summoning, the court was alive with whispers. The halls of the castle, grand and foreboding, gleamed with polished marble and shadowed tapestries. Rasp. Servants scurried along the corridors, their footsteps echoing off the stone walls. Nobles and advisors lingered near the throne, their expressions polite but wary, knowing better than to draw the king's ire. Alicia walked through the massive doors with a quiet courage, her leather-bound scrolls pressed to her chest. She was young, small in frame, but her eyes held a sharp intelligence. She had traveled from distant lands, guided by rumors of a kingdom cursed, seeking answers that few dared to seek. The cold air of the castle made her skin prickle, but she did not falter. She knew that whatever awaited her here, she would face it with clear purpose. King Eric sat upon his throne, a towering figure in dark armor that gleamed like polished night. His face was handsome, severe, and unreadable, framed by dark hair that fell in precise waves.
He did not rise as Alicia approached, nor did he glance directly at her.
Instead, his cold gaze swept over her like a blade, sharp and judging. "Who is this?" he demanded, his voice deep and commanding. "She is Alicia, your majesty," an advisor said, bowing low.
A scholar of ancient magic.
"She comes with knowledge that may be of use to the kingdom." Eric's eyes flicked to her once, briefly, and a slow, cruel smile curved on his lips. "Knowledge," he said, his tone dripping with disdain. "We have no need of children pretending to be scholars." "Step forward, girl." Alicia's heart pounded, but she did not shrink. She stepped forward, her chin lifted, meeting his gaze with quiet defiance. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I have studied the old texts, the magic that binds this land. I know the ways to see what the curse hides, and perhaps even to break it."
Eric laughed, low and harsh. The sound echoed in the great hall, filling every corner.
"You dare speak of curses, girl. You, who have never faced the shadows of a kingdom. You are nothing," he sneered, his words like ice.
Alicia felt the sting of his words, but she held her ground.
There was a strange power in him, a darkness that both frightened and fascinated her. She knew that beneath the cruelty there was a man shaped by loss, loneliness, and a heavy burden. "I may be nothing to you," she said softly, "but I am not nothing to the kingdom. And if you will not listen, then perhaps the shadows themselves will speak to you." The hall fell silent. For a moment, even the advisors dared not breathe. Eric's eyes narrowed, and for the first time his face showed something that was not mockery, curiosity. "Very well," he said finally, his voice lower, colder. "Show me then."
If you are as clever as you claim, perhaps I will not have to send you back to the streets you came from. Alicia bowed her head, hiding the thrill that surged within her.
To survive in the castle, to face the king's contempt, she would need both courage and cunning. Over the next days, she explored the castle under strict supervision. The corridors were labyrinthine, lined with tapestries that told stories of kings and queens long past. Battles fought and lost, and magic both feared and revered. She discovered that the castle itself was alive with whispers, echoes of old spells, faint traces of magic lingering in the air.
In the evenings, she observed Eric from afar.
He walked the halls alone, speaking to no one, his expression unreadable. Sometimes he would pause before the portraits of the queens of old, his fingers brushing lightly over the frames, the ghost of a memory flickering in his eyes. Alicia began to see the man behind the mask, a man trapped by duty, pride, and the shadow of his curse. Despite his sneers, there were moments when he could not hide his loneliness. Once, she saw him standing on the balcony under a silvered moon, staring at the forest beyond. His shoulders were tense, as if he carried the weight of the world on them. She wanted to speak to him, to offer solace, but she knew that in this court, weakness was danger. She remained silent, observing, learning. The turning point came one night when Alicia discovered a hidden door behind one of the tapestries in the east wing. It was small, almost imperceptible, but the air around it was thick with old magic. With careful hands, she pushed it open and found a secret chamber dimly lit by candles that had burned centuries old. The walls were lined with portraits, each one framed in gold and dusted with time. Alicia froze. One portrait in particular made her stomach twist. Her mother's face, pale and elegant, stared back at her from the canvas, eyes full of sorrow and secrets. How could this be? Why would her mother be here, in the heart of a castle that seemed to despise her very existence? Her mind raced with questions, but before she could linger, she heard footsteps approaching. She slipped behind the door, holding her breath as Eric entered the chamber. He did not speak at first, his eyes scanning the portraits with a mix of pain and recognition. "Why do you hide them?"
He whispered, almost to himself.
Rasp. His voice was low, reverent, tinged with sorrow. "Why do you remember what should be forgotten?" Alicia's heart pounded. Breaths. This was the first time she had heard him speak like this. Not as a king, not as a tyrant, but as a man weighed down by history and loss. She wanted to step forward to ask him about the connection, but fear held her in place. Finally, he left the chamber, the echoes of his footsteps fading into the halls. Alicia stayed hidden, her mind spinning. Her mother, the king, the curse. Everything was connected, though how she could not yet understand. The next morning the court gathered for the king's council, and Alicia presented her findings cautiously. She spoke of shadows in the kingdom, magical disturbances, and hints of the curse's origin. Eric listened, his expression unreadable, but the cold sneer never returned. Instead, there was a tension in his eyes, a storm barely contained, as if her words had touched something long buried. Yet, even as he nodded to acknowledge her, his pride remained unbroken. He allowed no kindness, no gratitude, only a wary respect that she had earned. Alicia realized then that the court was a battlefield of words and wits, and every small victory would require patience, courage, and keen intelligence. That night, as the moon rose pale over the castle, Alicia walked the quiet halls. She thought of her mother, of the portraits, and of the man who had called her nothing, yet now seemed haunted by her presence. Something unspoken hung in the air between them, a tension that neither dared name. She paused on the balcony overlooking the kingdom. The wind was cold, carrying the scent of pine and distant rain. Somewhere below, the lights of the village twinkled, like stars fallen to the earth. She felt a strange pull toward the castle, toward the king, toward the secrets that bound them together. And then, a sound behind her made her spin. The shadows in the hall shifted, and Eric's voice cut through the silence, low and dangerous. "Be careful, Alicia," he said. "In this castle, nothing is as it seems. One wrong step and you may find that the shadows do not forgive." Her heart raced, but she met his gaze steadily. "I have never feared shadows, Your Majesty," she replied, "and I will not begin now." For a moment, he said nothing, studying her with an intensity that made the hairs on her arms stand. Breath. Then, almost softly, almost reluctantly, he added, "Perhaps you are not entirely nothing." Alicia did not respond. She did not yet understand the full meaning of his words, but she felt a flicker of hope, or perhaps danger, kindle inside her. The castle seemed to breathe around them, alive with magic, secrets, and the weight of the past. And in that moment, she knew that her life, her destiny, and her heart were bound to this cursed kingdom, and to the man who had called her nothing. The wind rose suddenly, carrying whispers from the forests beyond, and Alicia shivered. She had uncovered the first thread of a mystery older than the kingdom itself, a secret that would change everything. Yet, before she could take another step, a shadow fell across the balcony. Turning, she found Eric standing there, his dark eyes unreadable. "You have begun a journey from which there is no return," he said quietly, his voice both warning and challenge. "Are you ready to face what lies ahead?" Elysia's heart pounded, her mind racing. She did not know the full danger, nor the full truth of her connection to the king. But she nodded, with quiet determination. "I am ready, your majesty," she said. Aric's lips curved in a faint, inscrutable smile, and for the first time, the air between them carried something more than fear or contempt. It carried a fragile, dangerous thread of trust, of recognition of something neither dared name. Breath. And then the wind howled, and from the shadows of the castle came a sound that would change everything. A whisper of a curse long forgotten, and the faint echo of a power waiting to be unleashed.
Alicia's eyes widened as the castle seemed to shiver around them.
Whatever lay ahead, she realized, her life, and perhaps the fate of the kingdom, would never be the same again. The morning sun struggled to pierce the thick mist that clung to the kingdom of Aloria. The castle stood like a silent guardian, its towers reaching into the gray sky. Within its walls, life went on, but an undercurrent of unease ran through the halls. Alicia had spent the first days exploring every corridor, library, and hidden chamber she could find. Yet, with every step, the weight of the castle and the man who ruled it pressed on her heart. King Eric's gaze had shifted. He no longer openly mocked her, though the cold pride in his eyes remained. Instead, he watched her with a careful intensity, like a hunter observing a creature he could neither touch nor fully understand. Alicia sensed it immediately, and a small thrill ran through her. She had stirred something in him, but whether it was curiosity, caution, or something far deeper, she could not yet tell. That morning she was summoned to the council chamber to speak before the king and his closest advisors. The room smelled of old wood and candle smoke. Nobles in rich fabrics whispered to one another, stealing glances at the scholar who had dared enter the castle unafraid.
"Sit!" Auric commanded, not looking at her, his voice carrying the familiar weight of authority. She obeyed, keeping her scrolls in her lap.
"The shadows in the north woods grow stronger," she began, her voice steady. "There are forces at work that are older than the kingdom. If we ignore them, they will strike the villages and spread further into the land." One of the advisors scoffed. "We have gods and soldiers. The kingdom is safe under His Majesty's rule." Alicia turned her gaze toward Eric, letting her voice drop. "Your soldiers are brave, yes, but courage cannot fight magic. If we do not understand the source of these shadows, then we fight in darkness, blind to what will come." Eric finally looked at her, his eyes dark and unreadable. "And you claim to know the source?" "Yes, your majesty," she said. "I believe it is tied to your curse. It calls to magic in the land, stirring forces long dormant."
"I can trace it, but I need access to the oldest texts in the castle archives." He studied her in silence.
The tension between them was thick, like steel stretched tight. Finally, he gave a short nod. "Very well, you will have the archives. But be warned, curiosity is dangerous here. Many have come seeking knowledge and have vanished." You will find no comfort in what you discover.
Alicia bowed, hiding her thrill.
The king's acknowledgement was small, but it was the first crack in the wall of disdain he had built around himself.
That afternoon, she entered the vast archives, a library of stone and shadow.
Endless rows of ancient books and scrolls towered over her, dust motes dancing in shafts of light. She spent hours poring over texts written in languages long forgotten, deciphering symbols and diagrams that hinted at the origins of the curse. Yet every time she glanced up, she felt the presence of someone watching her. She would turn to find Eric standing at the entrance of the archives, silent, motionless, like a shadow itself. Sometimes he would leave without a word. Other times he lingered, his dark gaze tracing her movements.
Alicia did not understand why he came.
She was both wary and curious, sensing a conflict within him, a struggle between his pride and a desire he did not fully acknowledge.
That evening, a sudden alarm echoed through the castle.
Breaths. Servants screamed, and guards rushed past her. Berestius. There she found symbols etched into stone, glowing faintly with old magic. The air was thick with the weight of forgotten spells and whispered voices. As she traced her fingers along the carvings, a whisper brushed her ear. Do you seek the truth? She spun around but saw no one. The castle itself seemed to breathe around her, alive with secrets and shadows. You are not safe here, the whisper said again.
The shadows know your presence. They will test you, and the king.
He is not what he seems. Her heart raced. Was this a warning, a threat, or a message from the curse itself? At that moment, Eric appeared at the top of the stairs, his dark eyes blazing in the dim light. You should not be here, he said, his voice low, dangerous. The castle protects itself. The magic here, it does not forgive mistakes.
Alicia straightened, meeting him without fear. I am not afraid of mistakes, Your Majesty.
I am afraid of inaction. Eric studied her for a long moment, then stepped closer, the shadows of the stairwell stretching across his face. You are bold, and boldness can kill you in this place, but perhaps it is needed. Days passed, and the bond between them grew complicated. They sparred with words as much as with deeds, each conversation a delicate dance of power, challenge, and unspoken longing. Alicia began to see moments of vulnerability in Eric, the way his shoulders slumped in private, how he would linger over portraits of women long gone, and the rare moments when he allowed a shadow of doubt to touch his proud face. One afternoon she found him standing alone on the balcony, staring into the misted valley below. The wind tugged at his dark hair, and the sun caught the edge of his armor, making him look like a fallen god. Why do you linger here? She asked, softly. He did not look at her. I am thinking, he said. Thinking about the past, about what cannot be changed. Perhaps the past can teach us, Alicia said, if we listen carefully.
He finally turned to her, eyes dark and unreadable.
And if the past is full of pain, then it is all the more reason to move forward, she replied. For a long silence they simply stood there, two figures bound by unspoken truths, watching the mist swirl over the kingdom. But the calm did not last. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, a messenger arrived at the castle gates. He brought news that sent a chill through the halls. Villages at the edge of the kingdom had been attacked by shadows, strange creatures that moved like living darkness. Survivors spoke of whispers and flames that consumed without reason. Breaths. Aric's face, usually so controlled, darkened. The curse is spreading its influence. If we do not act, the kingdom may fall. Alicia stepped forward. Then we must act together. I can trace the source of the shadows, but I will need you to trust me. Eric's eyes flickered, stormy and unreadable. He wanted to refuse, to push her away, to protect her from the dangers she did not yet understand. Yet he could not. For the first time he admitted, though only to himself, that he needed her. Needed her knowledge, her courage, perhaps even her presence in his life. "You may prove useful, girl," he said finally, his voice tight with restraint. "Do not disappoint me." Alicia bowed her head. "I will not, Your Majesty." That night, as the castle slept under a sky heavy with stars, Alicia sat in her small chamber, the wind whispering against the windows. Her mind replayed the day's events, the shadow attacks, and the king's rare flickers of emotion. She sensed that the curse's power was growing stronger, that the shadows would soon strike closer to the heart of the kingdom. And she knew something else, something far more dangerous. King Eric, who had sneered at her, dismissed her as nothing, and wielded power like a weapon, was beginning to feel more. More than he should allow, more than either of them were prepared for. Their fates, intertwined by magic, destiny, and unspoken longing, were heading toward a collision. And the shadows were waiting. The forest surrounding Vealoria was thick and heavy with mist, as though the air itself carried secrets. Alicia and King Eric moved cautiously along a narrow path that twisted between ancient oaks, their roots gnarled like the hands of time. The shadows of the trees stretched long and dark in the dim light, and every sound, the rustle of leaves, the distant cry of a bird, seemed magnified.
Alicia walked ahead, her senses alert.
The charm she carried in her hand pulsed faintly, a tiny beacon against the growing darkness. "The artifact should be close," she whispered, mostly to herself.
The energy in this place, it is stronger than I imagined. Eric followed silently behind her, his armor brushing softly against the mossy undergrowth. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, scanned every shadow, every movement. He did not speak, but Alicia sensed the storm behind his gaze, a mixture of worry, pride, and something he could not yet name. The journey had forced them into close quarters, and each step brought them deeper into a territory where the king's power and her magic had to work together. Yet as they moved, the tension between them was undeniable. Right. Each glance, each word, each brush of a hand against the other carried a weight neither could ignore. Hours passed, and the mist grew thicker. The forest seemed alive, whispering secrets in a language Alicia could almost understand. She paused by a small stream, kneeling to touch the water. "The artifact's energy is drawing from the shadows here," she murmured. "We're near." Eric crouched beside her, not touching, but his presence was a force in itself. "Stay alert," he said. "The forest will test us." It always does. Alicia nodded, feeling a thrill of danger and excitement. Breath. "I am ready." They moved deeper into the heart of the forest, following the pull of unseen magic, and then, without warning, the shadows attacked. From the darkness, forms of living smoke and black mist surged toward them, twisting and writhing like serpents. Alicia raised her charm, a circle of light flaring in the air, holding the shadows at bay. Eric drew his sword, its steel gleaming even in the dim forest light. Together they fought, moving as one, her magic guiding them, his strength shielding them. The battle was fierce but brief. The shadows hissed and recoiled from their combined power, finally dissolving into the mist. Alicia's heart pounded, her palms sweating. But she held herself steady. Eric's armor was scratched, his face grim, but he made no sound of complaint. "You are stronger than I expected," he admitted, his voice low, almost grudging. "And you are bad." "Less impossible than I thought," she replied, her lips curving slightly,
Though she did not meet his eyes, Eric's jaw tightened. The tension between them shifted, heavier now, deeper, though neither could name it aloud. They reached a small clearing where the ground was cracked and blackened, as though fire had kissed the earth long ago. In the center stood a pedestal of ancient stone, covered with runes that glowed faintly in the mist. Upon it rested a small crystal, pulsing with a soft blue light. Alicia stepped forward cautiously. "This is it. The artifact," she said. "It can help us understand the curse, and perhaps even break it." Arik's eyes scanned the surrounding forest, never leaving the shadows that still seemed to linger at the edges. "Brr. Take it carefully," he warned. "Its magic is old, dangerous. One wrong move, and we could both be trapped." Alicia nodded and reached out. As her fingers brushed the crystal, a surge of energy shot through her. Images flashed in her mind, visions of the past, of queens and kings long gone, of battles fought in silence, of a kingdom cursed by its own pride. She gasped, holding her head, as if the weight of centuries pressed upon her. Arik stepped forward instinctively, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. "Steady," he said. His touch, though brief, sent a strange warmth through her. She looked up, meeting his dark gaze, and for a moment the world around them, the forest, the mist, the shadows, faded into silence.
Why do you care? She asked softly.
"Why are you here with me?" Arik's eyes darkened. "Because if you fall, I do not know what I would be left with." Alicia froze. His words hung between them, unspoken yet heavy with meaning. She had expected contempt, commands, even anger, but this was different. Vulnerable, dangerous. Before she could respond, the forest erupted in chaos. Shadows surged again, more violent than before. The crystal's light flared, reacting to their fear and tension.
Eric drew his sword, stepping in front of her, shielding her from the first wave.
"Break." Alicia channeled her magic, her hands glowing as she pushed the shadows back. The battle stretched for what felt like hours. Exhaustion weighed on them, but neither faltered. In the midst of the fight, their eyes met repeatedly, unspoken words passing between them. Trust, reliance, something more profound than either had allowed themselves to feel. But finally, with a blinding flash, the shadows recoiled and vanished, leaving the clearing eerily silent. Alicia collapsed to her knees, panting, her hands trembling. Arik knelt beside her, his armor scratched, his face streaked with dirt and sweat, but his gaze was steady, fixed on her. "You are..." He glances around in despair. "Extraordinary," he said almost softly. Alicia looked at him, her chest heaving. "And you are not as impossible as I thought," she replied, a small, tired smile breaking through. They stayed in the clearing, catching their breath, listening to the wind whisper through the trees. For a moment, the world felt suspended, as if the forest itself were holding its breath. As they prepared to leave, Alicia noticed a faint glow in the distance. A second artifact, smaller but no less powerful. "There's more," she said, pointing toward the light. "Another source of magic. We need to find it."
Arik's eyes darkened with resolve. "Then we go."
"Brace together." They moved cautiously, but as they approached the glowing object, the ground beneath them shook. The forest seemed to grow alive with intent, twisting and shifting as though it were a living entity. Breaths. Shadows rose again, thicker and more aggressive than before. Alicia raised her charm, Arik his sword, and together they prepared to face the next wave. But the shadows were not the only danger. From the darkness emerged a figure, tall and cloaked in black. Its presence was commanding, powerful, and impossibly old.
You should not have come here, the figure said, its voice echoing in their minds as well as the clearing. Arik stepped forward, sword raised, eyes blazing. Who are you? The figure's hood fell back, revealing a face pale and carved with lines of ancient knowledge.
I am the guardian of what you seek, it said, and your presence awakens the trials you cannot yet survive. Alicia felt a chill run through her. The guardian's gaze seemed to pierce through her very soul. We must complete the task, she said firmly, breath. The kingdom's fate depends on it. Arik's hand brushed hers, brief and electric. Stay close, he said. I will not let you fall. The guardian raised its hands, and the shadows erupted again, this time moving in intricate patterns, almost like a dance. Alicia realized the trial was not only of strength, but of understanding, trust, and control. Their magic and skill had to work in perfect harmony, or they would fail. As they fought, Alicia and Arik moved closer, their bond deepening in the heat of danger. Every glance, every shared movement, every word unspoken drew them together. The forest, the shadows, the ancient magic, all faded into the background as they became the center of each other's world, even for a brief moment. Finally, with a coordinated effort, they subdued the shadows. The guardian stepped forward, nodding slowly. You have passed part of the trial, it said. But the final challenge awaits. Only by confronting what you fear most, what lies in your hearts, will the curse be broken.
Arik's jaw tightened, his pride clashing with the truth in the guardian's words. Alicia's hand hovered over his, trembling slightly, and he noticed it.
He wanted to pull back, to protect himself from what he did not yet understand, but he could not. The connection between them, fragile yet undeniable, held him in place. You are important to me, he admitted, barely above a whisper. More than I should allow. And yet, I cannot deny it. Alicia's eyes softened, and a small, brave smile appeared.
And you?
Are not alone. Not while I am here. Before they could speak further, a sudden wind tore through the forest, carrying with it whispers of old magic and forgotten power. The guardian vanished, leaving the path ahead dark and uncertain. Alicia and Arik exchanged a glance, understanding that the real trial, the one that would test their hearts and the kingdom, was only beginning. The forest was silent now, yet it carried a weight that pressed on the hearts of Alicia and King Arik, but not vanished. The air smelled of earth and smoke, and the mist swirled thick around their feet, twisting like living fingers. Each step toward the heart of the forest felt heavier, as though the trees themselves were testing their resolve. Alicia's hand hovered over the small crystal artifact she had carried from the clearing. Its faint glow pulsed with magic, responding to her heartbeat. She could feel its energy calling to the curse, drawing it into focus, forcing it to reveal itself. Her eyes met Arik's. His dark gaze was steady, unwavering, but she sensed the storm inside him, the pride, the fear, the longing, and the unspoken vulnerability he had never shown to another soul. We must be ready, she said softly. This is no longer just about shadows. The curse is alive, and it knows we are coming. Arik nodded, gripping his sword with quiet determination. I am ready, he said. Yet even as he spoke, she saw the doubt in his eyes. He was a king, proud and unyielding, but beneath his armor and the weight of centuries-old burdens, he was still human, still afraid of losing what he could not yet name. They moved deeper, guided by the crystal's faint glow. The trees grew denser, the air colder, and the mist seemed almost solid. Shapes danced at the edge of their vision, fleeting shadows that vanished when looked at directly. Alicia whispered ancient words of protection, weaving light and magic around them. The forest hummed in response, as if testing her will. Eric stayed close, silent but vigilant. He had learned to trust her instincts, to follow her guidance without question. For the first time he felt the weight of reliance, of needing another to stand beside him. He had always been alone, a king with a curse and walls around his heart, but Alicia had broken the smallest cracks in those walls. At last they reached a clearing larger than any they had encountered, and there, suspended in the center of a ring of blackened trees, floated a pillar of shadow, twisting and writhing like smoke in a storm. The curse revealed itself in physical form, a dark, shapeless mass, pulsing with malevolence and power. It was alive, ancient, and hungry for the hearts of the living. Alicia stepped forward, her hands glowing as she held the artifact before her. "This is it," she whispered. "The source of the curse. We must focus together."
"Alone, neither of us can defeat it." Arik's voice was low but commanding. "Then we fight as one!" Together they faced the shadow. Alicia channeled her magic into the crystal, sending waves of light toward the darkness. Arik struck with his sword, steel flashing, each swing infused with his own strength and determination. But the shadow was clever. It twisted around their attacks, striking with tendrils of darkness, whispering fears and regrets into their minds. Alicia faltered briefly, visions of failure and loss clouding her mind. She saw the kingdom destroyed, the villagers screaming, Arik falling into shadow. Panic surged, and the crystal flickered. "Do not let it break you," Arik shouted, placing a firm hand on her shoulder. His voice was sharp, but his eyes, those dark, stormy eyes, held something more. "Bray, a promise, a tether, Bray. G, you are not alone. I am here. We face this together." The words steadied her. She drew a deep breath and focused, pouring every ounce of courage and skill into the crystal. Eric moved beside her, striking with precision and force, cutting through tendrils of shadow and opening a path for her magic to flow unhindered. The battle raged like a storm. Light clashed with darkness, each wave of magic and steel shaking the clearing. The shadow shrieked, a sound that seemed to come from the depths of the earth itself. Alicia felt exhaustion creeping in, her limbs trembling. But she did not falter. She thought of the villagers, the kingdom, and of the man beside her, the man whose smears had once wounded her, now standing as her protector, her equal, her partner in this fight. Eric's breath came in controlled bursts. He had always been a warrior, but he realized now that this battle was different. Strength alone would not win. It required trust, faith, and the courage to face not only the shadow but themselves. For the first time, he allowed himself to feel fully, to admit the truth he had buried beneath pride and anger. The thought of losing Alicia, of facing this darkness without her, was unbearable. Breath. And in that moment he understood the depth of his heart. She was not merely important. She was essential. The only reason he could imagine breathing freely in a world of shadows.
Alicia, sensing the bond, glanced at him, her heart pounding.
Arik, we can do this.
Breath. Together.
He met her gaze, dark and fierce, and for the first time, he spoke what he had never allowed himself to say aloud.
Breast. You are my reason, my anchor. Without you, I cannot. The words were heavy with vulnerability and truth. Alicia felt her heart swell, a mixture of relief, fear, and hope. She stepped closer, letting their hands touch briefly. Electricity passed through them, a spark that strengthened the magic flowing from the crystal. With one final effort, they poured all their energy, magic and strength, courage and love, into the artifact. Light erupted, brilliant and blinding, chasing the shadows back into the depths from which they came. The forest shook, the ground trembled, and for a moment, everything seemed to hold its breath. Then, silence. Breaths. The shadow was gone. The curse had been broken, or at least weakened enough that the kingdom was safe for now. Alicia and Eric collapsed to their knees, breathing heavily, their hands still clasped. When they finally rose, the forest seemed changed. The mist had lifted slightly, the air lighter, almost golden with the first hints of dawn. The shadows no longer whispered threats, and the trees seemed to bow gently in acknowledgement of the bond they had forged.
Alicia looked at Eric. It is done. For now. Eric nodded, sheathing his sword.
His eyes lingered on her, full of an intensity she had never seen before.
No, he said quietly.
It is only the beginning, but you have shown me something I thought lost to me forever. Courage, hope, and love. Alicia's lips curved into a small smile, her tired eyes meeting his. Then we face the beginning together, Your Majesty, she said softly. For the first time, Eric allowed himself to smile, not the harsh, proud smile of a king, but a real human smile. And in that moment, Alicia realized the truth she had suspected for days. He was no longer the man who had called her nothing. He had become someone capable of vulnerability, trust, and love. The journey back to the castle was quiet, their footsteps soft against the mossy path. Breaths. The air smelled of rain and earth, and the first rays of sunlight glimmered through the canopy. They did not speak much, but neither needed to. The bond between them was undeniable, forged in battle, in courage, and in the acknowledgement of truths that had long been hidden.
Back in the castle, the people noticed a change in the king.
Bust. He was no longer distant, no longer a figure of pure fear. There was warmth in his presence, a subtle kindness in his words, and a rare humility in his demeanor. The kingdom itself seemed to breathe easier, as if the lifting of the curse had healed more than just the shadows. That evening, Alicia returned to the secret chamber where the portraits of the queens had hung. Breaths. She traced her fingers over her mother's face, feeling a connection stronger than she had ever imagined. The room was quiet, filled with the gentle glow of candlelight.
Eric entered silently, standing behind her. Your mother.
She was brave, he said softly. And so are you. You have changed me, Alicia. You have reminded me what it is to feel, to hope, to love.
Alicia turned to face him, her eyes shining.
And you have shown me that even the proudest heart can learn to trust, to fight, and to care. We have both changed, Eric. Together, he reached out, holding her hands gently but firmly. I cannot lose you again. Blessing. Never again. You are my reason to breathe. My anchor in a world that often forgets what it means to care.
Tears threatened her eyes, but she smiled, leaning into him.
And you are my strength, my shield, and the place where I can finally rest. They stood together, hands intertwined, hearts bound by the trials they had faced and the battles they had won. The castle, once cold and oppressive, now seemed lighter, as if the shadows themselves had been pushed back by the courage and love of two souls who refused to yield.
Yet, even as peace settled over Vyloria, a faint wind whispered through the towers.
Bah, somewhere in the distance, shadows lingered, silent, watchful, waiting. The curse may have been broken, but the world was never fully safe.
And for Alicia and Auric, life would always be a balance of love, courage, and vigilance. But for now, as the first true dawn broke over the kingdom, they allowed themselves a rare, precious moment of stillness. Together, they had faced darkness, fought fear, and discovered the strength of their hearts. Together, they had begun a new chapter, one where trust, hope, and love would guide them. Auric pressed a gentle kiss to Alicia's forehead, whispering words that would echo in her heart forever. You are everything, my breath, my heart, my life. I was nothing before you. Alicia rested her head against his chest, smiling, her heart full. And I will always be here, she said softly. With you, for whatever comes next. Outside, the kingdom awoke to sunlight glimmering over misty hills, unaware of the trials that had passed in its shadowed forests. Within the castle, two hearts stood stronger than ever, united by courage, trust, and a love that even a curse could not destroy.